Bama, Michigan, power matchup, intriguing matchup. Everything's on the line, college football playoff. Let's get to it right here at the Voice of College Football. And if you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. When Bama's on offense, it looks like this. 54th ranked offense in college football, averaging 401 yards per game. Yards per play, Bama better at number 30 in the nation, 6.36. Some of the better defenses Bama has faced. Look at Texas A&M, number 9 in the country in total defense, number 25 in yards per play given up. Georgia, top 10 defense, also number 13 in yards per play given up. Texas, top 25 defense in both categories. Tennessee in that top 30 to 40 range as well. Now, how did the Tide fare against these upper echelon defenses on their schedule? Well, we know that the week 2 appearance against Texas was not a great one for Jalen Milroe, and we know that his story, his ascension, his improvement, and Bama finding an identity around him to build this offense has been the storyline for Alabama football, coming back from an awful offensive first month. But that was most notably seen against Texas when Milroe made some bad choices, bad decisions, didn't see some coverages, and threw some bad interceptions against Texas in that 34-24 home defeat. Against Tennessee, Bama was down by 2 scores at home early, and this was at the point in which Jalen Milroe really started to catch his stride. The defense did contribute to the 27-0 comeback, but it was Jalen Milroe hitting that deep ball against Tennessee that proved to be the difference against the Vols. Another key step in Jalen Milroe's progress came at Texas A&M against one of the more talented defensive fronts in college football, where he had to use his legs but keep his eyes downfield to make throws downfield, also elude the Texas A&M pass rush in a 26-20 Bama win. Ole Miss fields a top 50 defense in college football. They really held down the Bama offense, and again, this was right when Bama was just starting to figure things out on that side of the football. And this was coming off some of those deplorable offensive showings that Bama really turned its season around, trailed Ole Miss early, and then marched on to the 24-10 win. So that was mostly the Bama defense getting it done, but Jalen Milroe certainly made big throws and big runs against an Ole Miss defense, number 59 in the country overall, number 48 in yards per play. Ironically, when Bama's offense was down, it was just seriously down because they played one of the worst defenses in the country in South Florida, number 131, number 118 in yards per play, and they couldn't do a darn thing until the fourth quarter. Of course, Jalen Milroe sat on the sideline, and that really turned the season around. There were monsoon-like conditions at times during that game in Tampa, but South Florida and Bama were tied at 3 for the longest time before Bama scored a couple touchdowns late to win the game 17-3. Again, one of the worst defenses in the country statistically. And then, of course, in the big matchup against LSU, the game that decided the SEC Western Division, into the third quarter, it looked like it was going to be one of those games that just went score for score, and the team with the ball last was going to win in a showdown between Jalen Milroe and Jaden Daniels. But Bama's defense stood tall starting in the third quarter, nicked up Jaden Daniels, and Bama rode home to the victory 42-28 in that one. Bama going up against a Michigan defense that ranks number 2 in all of college football in total defense, yards per game, number 4 in yards per play. How did Michigan fare against the better offenses on its schedule? And how about all those lousy offenses on Michigan's schedule? Against Ohio State, the Wolverines won 30-24. They had a crucial pick 6 early in that game by Mike Sanderstill that got them on the board 7-0. They also, of course, made the key interception by Rod Moore to seal the victory with the Buckeyes driving in the last few seconds of the game against an Ohio State offense that ranked number 37 in college football. 18th, though. The Buckeyes were number 18 in yards per play, so not a prolific Ohio State offense, of course, with Kyle McCord taking the reins from C.J. Stroud, but still a very capable Ohio State offense with plenty of weapons. Statistically, the second-best offense Michigan faced was UNLV at number 47 in the country, number 44 in yards per play. UNLV had a fine season, faltered late, but at the time that they played Michigan in September, the Runnin' Rebels were doing just that, running up big point totals and yardage early in the season, but of course could not do anything against Michigan. One of the Wolverines' toughest tests proved to be the second to last game of the season against Maryland, a Terps defense that proved to be up to the challenge in a one-score loss. Maryland, number 59 in the nation in total offense, number 51 in yards per play. Talia Tagovailoa at times carved up the Michigan defense, at other times was unable to get the job done. And, of course, it was Michigan's ability to rush Tagovailoa and create turnovers that proved to be the undoing of the Terps in that upset bid. Now look at all these deplorable offenses Michigan faced this season. Iowa dead last in yards per play and yards per game. East Carolina, number 132 per game and number 130 in yards per play. Michigan State, and of course the Wolverines shut them out. And let's credit Michigan here because Michigan State played competitive football against a number of decent teams, like an Iowa, for example, on its schedule, and certainly produced more offense against just about everybody else on its schedule, but against Michigan could do absolutely nothing. Shut out, but the Spartans are awful. Number 125 in total offense, number 128 in yards per play. Minnesota, bottom 10 in the nation, yards per play and in yards at number 120 and 125. Rutgers there as well. This just continues the pattern here. And the Scarlet Knights only scored the 7 points against Michigan in a 31-7 loss. Indiana put up a quick touchdown against Michigan, had another drive that went inside the 15-yard line, and if not for an errant pass, probably would have been up 14-0 on Michigan. And that Indiana offense, number 114 in yards per game, number 101 yards per play. Nebraska also one of the worst in the nation. And that Husker offense did nothing against the Wolverines. They had one drive in the first quarter, down 14-0 at that point. Drove it inside the Michigan 15 on a nice little 65-yard drive. And then they got stuffed on fourth down, and Nebraska could do nothing after that of consequence. And the Huskers, number 104 in total offense, number 117 in yards per play. So added up here, Michigan played 7 of the very worst offenses in college football. We're talking 7 of the 15 worst, statistically at least, that Michigan's defense got to feast on. Now let's break it down even further, looking at Bama's rushing attack, passing attack against the Michigan defense, both against the pass and against the run. So the Alabama rushing offense, 49th in the country in yards per game. This surprises me, especially with as good as Milroe is running the football, and of course sacks are included, but still, as devastating as Milroe is as a dynamic playmaker with his legs, Bama, number 70 in the nation in average yards per carry. Consider that although Bama's running back room is, of course, loaded with 4 and 5 stars, and these guys are supposed to break out, a guy like Jace McClellan had a nice season. Nobody has really emerged out of Bama's backfield to be a true star like we've seen in the past. Derrick Henry, TJ Yeldon, Trent Richardson, those guys, or even most recently, Najee Harris or Jahmyr Gibbs. Texas, the number 5 rushing defense in college football, limited Bama to 3.1 yards per carry. Jace McClellan, you see, 12 carries for 45 yards, and Jalen Milroe did some damage on the ground with 44 yards rushing. Tennessee's got the number 14 rush defense in all of college football. Texas A&M's at 16, Kentucky at number 19. Let's see how Bama fared against another 3 of the top 20 rush defenses in the country. Jace McClellan had a nice day against the Vols, 27 carries for $115. That's 4.3 yards per carry. And even more crucial to that Alabama win was that they were able to salt the game away with just a 1-score lead late in the game. They basically held onto the ball for the final 6 or 7 minutes and ran it down Tennessee's throats. And Jalen Milroe had a big 15-yard run to help close out that game. Now forget it when it comes to Bama rushing against Texas A&M. Less than a yard per carry. Again, sacks are involved. Of course, you see Jalen Milroe with negative 31 yards. That's sack yardage because he did have a run of 12 yards. Jace McClellan, 3.3 yards per carry. Bama, all sorts of issues trying to run the ball against Texas A&M. Bama did not completely just shred the Kentucky rush defense but they were solid and consistent in this game. You see Jace McClellan at 4.8 yards per carry. Jalen Milroe, despite, of course, sack yardage, ran for 3 touchdowns. He had a 16-yard run in that game. Justice Haynes, the prized freshman, had 33 yards at 5.5 yards per carry. And Bama, again, got the big lead. They could run the football. Kentucky knew they were going to run the ball, so that suppressed the rushing average as well at 4.1 yards per carry in Bama's 28-point win. As you might expect, Michigan's rush defense, one of the best in the country. Number 6 in yards given up per game. Number 6 in average yards per carry. And as you might guess, Michigan did not face top rushing offenses. Penn State statistically was the best rushing offense Michigan faced, and we're looking at average yards per carry. Penn State at number 41, Nebraska 56, Purdue 64, and Ohio State only number 72 in the nation in yards per carry. Although Michigan did face a much better version of Ohio State's rushing attack with Travion Henderson catching fire late in the season for Ohio State. So let's check out that game first and foremost. The Buckeyes basically couldn't run it against Michigan, except for they had one determined drive in the third quarter where they ran it down Michigan's throats, but didn't gash them. Did not gash them at all. They were running 4, 6, 3, 5, just consistently running it down the field. But there you see it. Chip Tranum with a 12-yard run. Otherwise, Michigan did not give up a play of over 8 yards in the running game. Xavier Johnson, 9 yards. Okay, 3.8 yards per carry for the Ohio State rush attack. And let's go back to this Penn State rushing attack again. Statistically, this is the best rushing attack that Michigan faced the entire season. And the Ohio State and Penn State games against Michigan are the most valid statistically because the games were competitive for the entire game, especially the Ohio State game down to the last play of the game. For Penn State, still a competitive game deep into the fourth quarter. So for Penn State, they actually ran the ball fairly well against Michigan in this game. Katron Allen, 12 carries, 72 yards. Nice rushing effort there. Drew Aller was able to actually break contain and do some damage. Had a touchdown run of like 10 or 11 yards against Michigan. Nick Singleton, a little bit less effective at 3.3 yards per carry, but added all together, 4.7 yards per carry is an excellent number against this Michigan rush defense. Alabama's pass efficiency, not total yards per game. I don't think that that's relevant. That's dependent on how much you throw the football. But pass efficiency, how effective are you throwing the football? Well, Bama's number 6 in the country. And we know that they got off to a pretty lousy start against the likes of Texas and South Florida. The rating is 167.3 for Jalen Milroe, and he accounts for 90-some% of these stats. 23 touchdowns, 6 picks for the Bama passing attack against pass defenses that ranked number 9, Georgia, Texas 33, Ole Miss 48. Those are the 3 in the top 50 that Bama faced from a pass efficiency defense standpoint. The really bad ones in the SEC were LSU number 94, Mississippi State at number 107. Let's look again at bad early Jalen Milroe against Texas, 14 of 27 for 255. That's not awful, but it was the 2 interceptions that were huge in this game and were just, if you saw the plays, you could just see where he did not read the coverage, did not see and recognize the coverage, and just was baited and deceived into a bad throw. 2 touchdowns, 2 picks for Jalen Milroe against Texas. And, of course, the most recent and the most important game for Alabama was winning the SEC championship game against the 2-time champions, Georgia, and Jalen Milroe didn't have to throw it a ton in this game, 13 of 23. He's not going to be a high percentage guy. For a $192, no picks, 2 touchdowns. So he did his job in this game as Bama won 27-24. Look at this Michigan pass defense. The opponent passer rating is only just a tick over 100. Number 6 in the nation. Have given up just 7 touchdown passes against 16 interceptions. Okay, the Ohio State pass offense was the best that Michigan faced at number 14 in the country. Again, that's pass efficiency. Maryland, number 49, Penn State, number 58. So Michigan faced only 3 in the top 60. And look at all these bad, awful passing offenses that Michigan faced, which, of course, plays into the Michigan ranking. It all works together. Good Lord. In order of ineptitude, East Carolina 133. Iowa not last, number 132. How about that? Nebraska 130, Rutgers 127, Minnesota 120, Michigan State 112, Purdue 103. Let's get back to the Ohio State and Penn State games, also the Maryland game, to see how the Michigan pass defense fared against actual teams that could throw the ball downfield and throw it to a teammate that would catch the football. The Wolverines gave up 271 yards passing to the Buckeyes and Kyle McCord and got hit with plays downfield of 44 yards, 32, and 28. They did come up with the two big plays of the game. The first quarter interception that led to the touchdown that we talked about, and also the final play interception that preserved the win. They did give up 271 yards passing at 9.3 yards per attempt. 18 of 30 is 60%. So Ohio State fairly effective in the passing game. Michigan made the two big plays, so they did prove to be somewhat susceptible against a decent or strong passing offense. A lot of playmakers, questionable quarterback play where some throws were missed and some throws and receivers open were missed as well. 1 week earlier against maybe the best throwing quarterback in the Big Ten, Taulia Tagovailoa, a little bit more of the same, actually. As Michigan gave up 247 yards passing, gave up the 24 points. Taulia hit 21 of 31, but also threw the two picks that were critical as Michigan hung on for a 7-point win. Maryland was able to hit throws downfield of 34 and 24 yards in particular as Michigan again won the game by a touchdown. And then if you saw the Penn State game, was it the Michigan pass defense and pass rush, or was it Drew Aller? I'm going to say it was mostly Aller, although Michigan's defense played extremely well in this game. But Aller just freaking missed throws all over the place. 10 of 22, 70 yards. Just a bad effort on his part. Missed key third and fourth down throws. And so Michigan holds Penn State to 70 yards passing on 22 throws. Penn State's receivers did not challenge Michigan downfield as they completed a 19-yarder and a 13-yarder against the Michigan defense. Now let's go Michigan offense, Alabama defense, as the Wolverines relied more heavily on the pass early in the season than they have in recent years, as J.J. McCarthy put up some big passing numbers for a Michigan offense that was so run-dependent with Cade McNamara in previous seasons, and then also with J.J. at the controls in 2022. And the rushing attack not as prominent for Michigan. We will look at it against that Alabama defense that improved as the season wore on. Michigan on the offensive side of the ball was just 68th in yards per game at 380.5, but in yards per play, much better. Didn't run a whole lot of plays. Were not in a hurry. Usually had a big lead. Number 43 in yards per play at 6.12. The best defense Michigan played, Penn State, statistically, number 1 in all of college football, and number 1 in yards per play. Ohio State at number 3, Iowa at number 5, and Iowa at number 2 in yards per play. So the Michigan offense faced 3 of the top 5 defenses in the country statistically, and Nebraska wasn't too bad itself. The Huskers, number 13 in yards per game given up, number 9 in yards per play. Rutgers in the top 20. Bowling Green pretty stout at number 30 in total defense, number 43 in yards per play. And even Maryland, look at the yards per play total at number 20 in all of college football. The worst defenses the Michigan offense faced, UNLV at number 102 despite the 9-4 record, Minnesota at number 98. Those were the only two lower than number 80 in total defense. All right, let's go a little bit deeper against these top 3 defenses, Ohio State, Penn State, and the most recent game, the Big Ten championship game against Iowa. Of course, Michigan won 26-0. They had no threat of Iowa scoring in this game or scoring in a substantial way to threaten the Michigan offense. So let's take these numbers into consideration that Michigan was comfortable in its offensive approach, but still, man, the Iowa defense laid it on Michigan's offense. Only 213 total yards by Michigan. J.J. McCarthy, though, pretty efficient, 22 of 30, short throws, 147 through the air. They only hit on 4 plays downfield of 14, 14, 10, and a 13-yarder. So nothing over 15 yards. And the Michigan rushing attack was stymied by the Hawkeyes here. Blake Corum, 16 carries for 52 yards. That's 3.3 per carry. Donovan Edwards did have a 17-yard run, but overall Michigan at less than 2 yards per carry, sacks included, against the Iowa defense. Michigan more effective against Ohio State in a different kind of game. 338 yards of total offense is still not prolific. JJ was oh so efficient, though, in this one. He was laser sharp, 16 of 20. Again, not huge plays downfield, but man, these throws that JJ made against Ohio State were killer and decisive in this game. One touchdown pass that was, of course, a work of art, as the Michigan rush game also chipped in the fourth quarter, really stymied for 3 quarters, kicked it in the fourth quarter with a couple long runs. Alex Orji had a 20-yarder as he filled in for JJ on one series. And Blake Corum, of course, the 22-yard touchdown that proved to be decisive. McCarthy got outside of contain for 15 yards as well. And then in the passing attack, we see 34 yards downfield to Colston Loveland and a 22-yarder to Roman Wilson. 19 yards to Cornelius Johnson and a 16-yarder to A.J. Barner. And now it's the infamous Penn State game. Infamous in that Michigan just basically said, you can't score on us, and your defense is pretty darn good, and they're coming after our quarterback, and we're having trouble in pass pro, so we're just not going to pass it. J.J. McCarthy did go 7 of 8 for 60 yards, and then Michigan shut it down with 32 consecutive runs to close out a 9-point win. And so they ran the ball effectively overall with 227 yards at almost 5 yards per pop, but again, they started to spring the long runs in the fourth quarter once they wore down the Penn State defense. But early on, it was a rough go for Michigan trying to gain yardage in any such way against Penn State. Blake Corum, again, 5.6 yards per carry, had the big 44-yarder. Donovan Edwards broke free for 22 yards at 5.2 per carry on 10 rushes. And J.J. McCarthy effective against the Penn State defense in keeping them honest, as Michigan went for 287 in total yardage in this game against Penn State, the number 1 defense in all of college football. The stats aren't going to be quite as extreme, but this Bama defense is lights out. It's so good. It's always been good and continues to be good, and I believe that we are going to be blessed by seeing the 2 best cornerback tandems in all of college football matching up with Michigan and with Alabama. Let's check out the Bama defense. Number 18 in all of college football in total defense, and also number 18 in yards per play given up. The Tide face some really good offenses. I guess this would be pretty good. LSU, number 1, and number 1 in yards per play. Georgia, top 10 in yards per play and in total yards. Texas, number 9 in yards per game, number 14 in yards per play. Ole Miss at number 15 and number 23. Tennessee was a top 20 offense in any way you measure it, yards per play, yards per game. The one bad offense that Alabama faced in the SEC in particular was against Arkansas, and the Hogs challenged Bama in the second half. They scored 3 straight times to make it a 24-21 ball game and really threatened Bama in the final 5 minutes under KJ Jefferson at the controls. But that Hogs offense, number 116 in total offense over the course of the year. But if you understand Arkansas's playmakers and KJ Jefferson, you know that they're really much better than 116, but just did not produce, but gave Bama a scare in the second half. So let's check out this Bama defense against the 3 best offenses they faced. LSU, Georgia, Texas. This LSU game in Tuscaloosa decided the SEC Western Division, and it was a shootout early, and then the Bama defense really took control. As we mentioned earlier, Jaden Daniels hit on 15 of 24 for 219. Garrett Nussmeier had to step in for Jaden Daniels. He was nicked up late in the third quarter in that game, and he was able to come back. Nussmeier hit on those 5 of 10 passes, so that's a pretty significant time in which Jaden Daniels had to leave the field, and that was the game and the point in the game in which Bama swung a close one into a bit of a comfortable lead. This game was 21-all at the half. You see Jaden Daniels did throw a pick that was deflected, and he also ran for 153 yards against the Bama defense and for a touchdown, as Look at that, yards per carry by the LSU rushing attack, which was basically Jaden Daniels. So if J.J. McCarthy wants to do that, and he's able to do that, I'm not saying that J.J. is Jaden Daniels, but he certainly has some of those attributes. Bama had a difficult time covering Malik Neighbors, one of the best wide receivers in all of college football, 10 catches for $171 and a touchdown. His running mate is Brian Thomas, who was limited on that night, 3 for 36, did have a 23-yarder. Bama giving up 34 points at home against Texas is not a good look, but let's understand the interceptions by Jalen Milroe directly led to points, put Bama's defense in horrible field position. Quinn Ewers hit on 24 of 38 for 349 and 3 touchdowns as Bama's defense got lit up a bit at times. Jatavian Sanders is a monster, 5 catches for $114. He had a 50-yarder. A.D. Mitchell had a 39-yarder. Xavier Worthy a 44-yarder. I don't know that Michigan's wideouts, maybe the tight ends, will have some room in the middle, but the wide receivers stretching Bama's defense in their corners for those kind of plays, I don't necessarily see that happening. Texas running the ball, they were decent. Jonathan Brooks, 14 carries for 57 yards, just enough to keep the passing attack going and the defense honest. Now to the showdown in Atlanta against the Bulldogs. Georgia marched it down the field, 75-yard drive, touchdown, bam, 7-zip. Then the Alabama defense did not give up a touchdown until the fourth quarter, and not until they had a 2-score lead. Carson Beck threw for 243 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, 21 of 29. Pretty efficient, but not that dangerous downfield. Arian Smith had the 51-yarder you see there. They also hit for another 23 and 21-yarders downfield. Rushing attack, look at Georgia. Maybe the best offensive line in all of college football. Only went for 2.5 yards per carry. Kendall Milton, 13 for 42. Not a whole lot there. Deshaun Edwards, really good back. 10 carries, 38 yards. The Bama defense did a heck of a job in this game against Georgia. We know the Michigan ground attack was dominant in 2021 with Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum, and then in 22 with Corum and Donovan Edwards. And even though Corum led the nation in rushing touchdowns with 24 this season, Michigan less than dominant on the ground, struggling many times. 60th in the nation at less than 162 yards per game. And when you go to the yards per carry, 73rd in the country at 4.27. They did face these strong rushing defenses. Of course, Penn State, number 3 in the nation. Number 2 in yards per carry against. Nebraska, number 7 and number 7. Iowa, 14th in the nation in yards given up per game on the ground. And number 8 in yards per carry. Ohio State on the fringe at the top 20. Maryland in the top 40. The worst rush defense that Michigan faced was Minnesota. Surprisingly, the Golden Gophers playing extremely strong defense in recent years, but took a major tumble in 2023. The number 107 rush defense in the nation, better in yards per carry at number 75. How does Bama hold up against the run? Well, we last saw them in the regular season, at least, against the Auburn Tigers when Auburn had no threat of a passing attack, having difficulty against that Auburn rushing attack, which is pretty strong, and Bama faced some really good rushing attacks. LSU, number 8 in the nation and number 1 in yards per carry, thanks to Jaden Daniels. Tennessee at number 13 in yards per game, number 6 in yards per carry. Auburn ranks in the top 15 to 20 in both categories. Georgia fell back in terms of yards per game, but they threw the ball more with Carson Beck, and therefore the Georgia Bulldogs still a strong 18th in the country in rushing offense. So the Bama defense did a fine job against Georgia's rushing attack in that game. South Florida at number 30. Would be surprising to me that they are 30th in the country in rushing, but they run the ball a lot because they're only number 83 in yards per attempt. There we see Texas. They're a top 25 rushing offense. Kentucky's only 96th in the nation in rushing offense. Get this, but they're number 25 in yards per carry. Michigan's passing numbers in regards to whole, large, total offense pass numbers are not going to wow anyone. But pass efficiency, J.J. McCarthy had a fine season. Had a couple trip-ups, Bowling Green, and elsewhere. But overall, excellent season by J.J. McCarthy, and Michigan's pass efficiency strong. Now, we know the narratives, and those are more important than the overall numbers. The Penn State game, Michigan came out. J.J. McCarthy, 7 of 8, throwing very conservative passes. Then they shut down the pass game because they trusted the defense in the running game and because Penn State's defensive line was devastating. They threw the ball well against Ohio State, 16 of 20. But again, they relied on the run. They had a lead for most of the game. Against Iowa, you grab a 2-score lead on the Hawkeyes and game over when you're as good as Michigan. Didn't have to throw it a whole lot. But again, they struggled in the pass game against the better defenses. So it was a combination struggling against some of those teams like a Maryland. We mentioned Penn State and Iowa as well. But also because of the game situation, relying on the defense to run game. So let's look at Michigan in terms of pass efficiency. Number 5 in the nation. J.J. McCarthy, 21 touchdowns, 5 picks. The pass defenses they faced, and again, this is not total yardage because that's a misleading statistic. Teams have to throw the ball if they're behind. Teams give up a lot of passing yardage if they're ahead in a lot of games. So this is pass efficiency. Ohio State, number 3 in the country. Iowa, number 5. Penn State, 8. Nebraska, 15. Maryland in the top 20 in pass efficiency defense, and Rutgers at number 24. So Michigan faced 6 of the top 25 pass efficiency defenses in all of college football. And Bama's right there as well at number 17, giving up just 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And Bama faced that number 1 pass offense out of LSU, another top 10 figure with Georgia, another top 12 pass efficiency offense with Jackson Dart and Ole Miss, and then also Texas in the top 20 with Quinn Ewers, who threw for 369 against Bama and 3 touchdowns. Let's also get a read on a couple other key statistics involving this game and this matchup because sometimes special teams are ignored. We're not going to run through all the punt return yardage, punt coverage, kickoff return yardage, and so forth, which has been minimized by recent rules changes, of course, in terms of kickoff returns, and even punt returns are less than they have been. And we've done those comparisons in past videos looking at the past 10 years of college football and how special teams have been minimized and changed. But let's look at the field goal kickers, at least here, with James Turner, 16 of 18 for Michigan. Will Reichard became the all-time point scorer in college football with 539. He has hit on 8 field goals in his career of at least 50 yards and 20 of 23 overall this season. Turnovers. Turnover margin could be critical. We know that the team that wins the turnover margin wins the game almost all the time, depending on whether it's +1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Michigan's +17 this year, Bama at +8. And then in regards to penalties, Michigan is the least penalized team in all of college football. Bama's about mid-tier at number 56. I was asked for and delivered a prediction on Michigan podcast a couple weeks ago. You can certainly check out that episode. Don't hold me to it because I will deliver my official prediction on Michigan, Alabama when we get closer to the game. But I certainly have a definite lean in this one. Please join us right here at the Voice of College Football. Leave those comments down below. Let me know what we missed, what we hit on, and what you would like to see right here at the Voice of College Football.